This is a message from our sponsor. I'd like to introduce you to Publica by IAS, the award-winning CTV ad server trusted by some of the biggest streaming services and smart TV manufacturers globally. Publica helps a growing number of leading AVOD and FAST services to power their programmatic ad break decisioning via products including a unified auction, server-side ad insertion, and a demand-agnostic ad server built from the ground up around streaming. Head to getpublica.com to find out how they help CTV publishers to grow their advertising revenues and provide streaming audiences with linear-like TV ad break experiences. Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. This is Ari Paparo. I'm joined today by Eric Franchi and our guest, Keith Gooberman, the CEO of Programmatic Mechanics. Keith, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ari and Eric.
Just a quick reminder to those listening, we did a great interview with Nexon, formerly known as Tremors. That's on Marketecture TV. Also, some people may not know this. If you pay for Digiday, you can get a special deal on Marketecture. We have a joint subscription deal. Reach out to Digiday to have Marketecture added to your subscription. Okay, so let's jump in. So Keith, Programmatic Mechanics, it's a good name. What is it?
Programmatic Mechanics, 10-year-old media company. We called ourselves an independent trading desk in the early years, but I learned how to buy across the DSPs, built some relationships, and then was like, I'm going to go try to do this myself. I raised a seed round of a couple $100,000 from a guy named Paul, who's my partner.
Paul? You just took his name? Took his money?
And we started 10 years ago, and I basically went out and big managed service business at the time, people using a lot of outsourced programmatic vendors to kind of help them procure this ad space in the programmatic bucket. And I just went out and said, we're good at this. We're transparent. We'll tell you what we're doing, and we'll drive results. Give me a head-to-head with all these people, and let me prove that there's algorithms and margin and how much the middleman is taking is a big part of the conversation as well. And I tried to bring that to the forefront, won enough clients, built the business, and here we are.
So we had MIQ on Marketecture TV. I actually just interviewed Digital Remedy. It hasn't been published yet. It's amazing how much value you can add by doing this programmatic work for people because it's still so hard.
And getting harder. Thought it was going to get easier there for a while, but I think with privacy, it's about to get more fragmented and complicated. But yeah, I think that once you understand how the dollars flow from the buyer to the publisher, with agencies involved and media companies, there's just a lot of room in there to improve the flow, and that's kind of what we do with different terminology.
Besides privacy, what is happening that makes you say it's going to get harder?
Well, you guys have, I've listened to a bunch of the podcasts. You just had Kevel with James on here, and everything's an ad network. Like, everybody's about to say, yes, I've joined this privacy group and I'm making something available. Yes, I enabled these IDs and you can try to pick off my inventory using these IDs. But if you want my first-party data, which is the good stuff, and the ads on my network /app/CTV channel /bag of a taxi cab, you got to log into my platform or work through this series of APIs or like access this now with this credentials. The SOC, with also like SOC, that's like the framework every company has to adhere to for like privacy, to fit into like you've checked the privacy box. It's just a lot of logins. There's just going to be a lot of logins.
Right. So you have a fragmented buying landscape and fragmented reporting and attribution.
Yeah, well, yeah. And like the who's telling me the truth about what's working, direct response is going to, I don't want to say not work anymore, but like kind of not work, like have tremendous changes in the way that advertisers consider these like hardcore DR metrics of conversions and lifetime value equations. All those things are about to like work on very small pieces of inventory, but then there'll be gigantic swaths of inventory that don't communicate with that. So it's just going to be, after the 10 years I've been doing this, there's now like a couple of buying platforms that are like the premier platforms, and everybody uses that to procure a lot of the programmatic space. I just think that that's going to kind of, they've gotten it down. They're trying to get the logins down. I think it's about to go the other way.
So do you think people are in denial about the effect of the Chrome cookie removal and the effect it's going to have?
Yes.
So are we going to wake up one day on April 1st, 2024, and people are going to log into their dashboards and there's just going to be nothing there? I'm exaggerating, but
we're going to touch on these like made for advertising websites as well.
You will get to that.
But a problem with that is that a lot of people use the click as the metric of results. And like, I think that with a lot of these like hardcore DR metrics, measuring conversions and post-view action and all that, that is going to evaporate more than it has. And I believe that people are building these solutions to try to overcome the fact that the cookies, which track most of conversion activity, will no longer work. But I don't believe they're aware of how small the inventory will become that does still allow this stuff to work.
How do you translate that to your customer? So I'd assume your customer is less sophisticated because they're hiring you to do the work. You don't want to call your customers unsophisticated, but you know what I mean. Like, how do you translate the in-depth, in-the-weeds knowledge that people like you and I have about cookies to a CMO who might not really have that much context?
Well, I will say part of a lot of my activity now has been that we're launching a DSP, like a true DSP in Pontiac. And what I would say is that my customers and all the buyers have gotten smarter. There's not as many people, I don't think, looking as much for outsourced firms to do this. And they've kind of all, a lot of the biggest clients and smartest clients and agencies and all these people know more about what programmatic is and do a lot of the lifting themselves. And that's a little bit of why we not only offer the managed service, but have morphed to kind of a self-service, a more standard, easy to understand offering, because talking to people about this and trying to make sure that they understand the nuances of where a managed service works is difficult. There's not that many people. If the people understand it to that level, as you know, they're like, I'm going to do this myself. So it's this balance of like, listen, we can be a trusted partner. We do it transparently. We're good at it, blah, blah, blah. But over time, I've seen what I would call the writing on the wall to be like, we have to build a self-service option only because our clients are some of the smartest, and it's hard to, we got to keep inventing ourselves over time to like give them a way to activate with us to do it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, was because you and I had lunch a month ago and you told me you were building a DSP. And I said to myself, I have two reactions. One is, that's crazy. Why we need another DSP? Like we need a hole in our head. Then the other action is, it's probably a good business. Like everyone loves a good DSP. Why not? So you did YOLO, build a DSP. What's the deal?
There's not many people on that you could put on a call that have also said, I'm going to build a DSP, and you're one of them.
And people thought I was such an idiot for doing it.
Well, yeah. So okay. So you guys know how people like raise money and deal with this market. So I built this media business that was managed service. And it, transparent, but it did well. I got traders to run. I ran it very lean, right? I only hired traders when I needed to, train them out of school. Same with account managers. Salespeople are a lot of my friends. So we built it over time where like I bootstrapped it, but it did make some money. And I took that money that it made and I just invested it straight in building a technology team. So first they built like very naturally, let's think about a business that does managed service. In the managed service world, you'll have an agency that represents 12 dentists in South Carolina. And the dentists want to spend $200 in media a month. And nobody wants the business. Nobody wants it. It goes from this guy to this guy to this guy. Nobody wants. I would take anything. I love that. People who need help with their teeth. What is it? Oh, it's 2 zip codes you service? Great. I would love that business. Like, so my traders are like, Keith, like this. I mean, I get it. You like this guy and he's got the connections with the dentist. I'm like, he just onboarded another dentist. And they're like, I know, but it's only, it makes us like $17 a month. And they're like, and I'm not, I get it. You're a business, but as the person running it and the account manager, and they're sitting there being like, what are we doing? They're like, it just doesn't seem financially sane to be doing this. And I was like, you never know when the next dentist is the one that wants to blow it out on the billboards. But regardless, over time, when I had a colleague, a very, very smart, my CTO, Eric Thorson, he joined and it was almost like, I want to join. I like what you're doing. Let's build something. And then we were like, okay. And he was like, what do you want me to build? And I was like, well, I got this problem with this trader who's running the 12 dentists. Can you help them? So he built a tool over the AppNexus buying API to help onboard and run a lot of campaigns. And I was like, well, that helps. That's good. Then I was like, can you make a UI so that they can control the campaigns themselves? And he was like, sure. It's going to take me 1.5 years. And I was like, time we got.
The dentists are not in a hurry.
We have a buying platform that works. And this is the Pontiac version 1.0. It's like a login. You can use it. You can run campaigns. I shifted all the small business to that. It accepts credit cards via Stripe. And we built this business. And my story is not like I had this great idea. It's like so simple in the way. So then they were like, okay, we're done. The AppNexus API, we've built against 99% of it. And I was like, wow, you got this whole team now. We have an offshore team. We have people in the US. We're a very talented little team. And they were like, what do you want to do next? And I was like, well, we got all these people. We got to do something. I got to pick off something bigger. He's going to ask me again in a week and a half. So I was like, listen, the cookie thing. Okay, so if you build a DSP, and this is a good conversation with you as somebody who's done this many times, cookies make a DSP very complicated. You have to build a battleship. You have to build a tool that can ingest millions of pieces of data a second and to check each one of them versus 200 different lists of things. It's complex.
A lot of people think the QPS is the big driver of costs in a DSP, and it is, but actually data storage is a bigger cost. It's more complicated and it's a bigger cost.
And it's just complicated, right? So I found unbelievable engineering talent.
Yeah.
But it's like, can you build a tool that can handle 30 million a second? They're like, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
And that always made me nervous because I can't run remarketing if I can't get the QPS really high.
Right. You got to get the dental intenders to.
Exactly. I'm not going to reach the 6 clients they want to reach in their remarketing pool.
Yeah. We need people. We need to retarget. Like, have you been to the dentist? It's your 6-month checkup. So I'm trying to think. Is the joke like 4 out of 5 dentists prefer programmatic mechanics, or is the joke like programmatic mechanics go into competition with Gum?
It does seem more appropriate for their business to be in the dental space.
Well, they do dental imagery in addition to ad tech. Eric, you were going to jump in here?
Yeah. Two quick observations. Number one, I wish we had video because when Keith was talking about his whole dental journey, I mean, I fell off my chair, quite literally. All right, we need to reconsider that.
Would you invest if I said I had a dental DSP? Is that an Imperium investment?
Not a dental DSP, but also observation number 2, like what a cool story about like a journey of like building a cool biz and bootstrapping it. And I think the opportunity for a reimagined DSP to serve various verticals and segments is right there. So then that's my question, which is, at least at this point, like, what do you either envision or what are you actually seeing in terms of the SMBs as a customer segment versus sort of like the larger, what you would consider traditional programmatic marketers? Like, are you going in this SMB direction because you think that there's a real market there?
So I'm gonna answer you with continuing the story if that's okay, because you kind of walked right into it.
You're like Joe Pesci. I can't stop you.
Okay, so we're running the dentist. We've morphed them onto the self-service platform. I then build the self-service platform. Again, it's built on AppNexus's back at this point, where I start getting bigger clients. I'll get a guy who does not 5 dentists, but he does 100 car dealerships. And all of a sudden, he's onboarding dealership. And the revenue goes this way. And all of a sudden, my team, who thinks I'm insane for the 12 dentists, is like, he's not insane. This is brilliant. And what happens is they grow. And they get to 6 figures a month. And you guys have run businesses before. A big client really makes a big difference. And then he calls me one day and he goes, hey, great news. My spend's so high, I got an AppNexus seat directly. And I was like,
that'll happen.
Yeah, well, interesting. And he's like, so we're going to offboard, but thanks so much. You guys have been great. And I was like, this is tough. And, my team is like, we got another dentist. And I'm like, go shove the...
You're above the dentist
you're missing
at this point.
They're like, I thought the dentist was the point. I'm like, all right. So I realized 2 problems. One is that I'm losing customers at the high end. And then the other observation, and this is the opposite of the SMB story, but the other observation, because again, I'm running a managed service business that, luckily from my talented salespeople, we've got some bigger clients. They're cutting these PG CTV deals, okay? And they're making an agreement with a publisher. And the publisher goes, all right, what do you want? And the client's like, oh, I want your premium package with all the good stuff. And they're like, you want any zip codes? Do you want any audience targeting? How many do you want? Like, what is this? And I was like, the publisher is filtering all of this on their end, and they're sending a deal that's going to have very few QPS. this deal is going to have like 1,000 QPS, and it's going to be for the most valuable inventory on the planet. So that was the other observation, is I was like, one, I need something to keep the clients who get bigger around longer. And then the other one was, there's going to be an opportunity in CTV to have a much lighter piece of technology to transact giant pieces of business. So then we took our accumulated business and went to the big SSPs and the biggest providers, and we were able to say, hey, we've built a DSP. This took us 2 more years, by the way. But we built a endpoint that can receive traffic. And they're like, what's your max QPS? And we'd be like, 20,000. They'd be like, oh, that's fine. We're going to send you a deal of 1,000. And I was like, exactly. This is the opportunity, is that you don't need, the quote I use around the office that nobody really likes, is that they've all built battleships and we've built a speedboat, and it is now a straight up race. And like, we can just go faster. And I still have the Pontiac 1.0 version that handles small clients, but we now have the Pontiac Enterprise version where I'm talking to very large buyers. And my approach at the moment, while it seems a little nuts, is I will just charge you much less than the other people will charge you for these very simple deals that you're running.
Right. Yeah. This is an observation a bunch of people had, which was that the reason these battleships were built was for complicated audience-based targeting in the open web on, millions of QPS. And CTV largely doesn't work that way. Programmatic guaranteed deals, DSPs don't do anything besides respond and report.
Yes, no, yes, no, that's it.
Right. So how do you think about your customers? Like, are you only going to be able to onboard customers who only want what you offer? What happens when one of your customers signs up for your low cost, speedboat, and then they say, hey, by the way, we want to do, a banner reach campaign on the open web?
So yeah, we build out the DSP, and now we kind of have this idea where it's like, okay, what is the information we get back that's going to be privacy safe across the board? And not my idea, Eric and team's kind of vision here was like, we'll always be able to use zip code. Always be able to use zip code. And then we'd all, in a organization, you often read the same book, right? You're all like, hey, I just read this, you should read this. So we'd all read the stories of Jim Simmons, who made Renaissance the investment vehicle. Renaissance is like a algorithmic private equity fund or investment bank, but they've built an algorithm that just like makes stock decisions on its own since 1975. And their philosophy was like, we just need to give it more information. Okay, so yes, we need the stock price of everything that moves all the time. That was like 1975. But by 1980, they were like flight patterns, weather data, anything we can get from the commodities market, real estate information, like just kept feeding this algorithm that's now manages trillions of dollars, just feeding it more information. So we kind of had that philosophy where we should make a platform that brings in everything we can learn about zip codes and gives that to the buyer to use. So now we have what we think is a competitive cookieless product called the Pontiac ART, or Audience Research Tool. And that plugs into the DSP for the CTV. But if I expand past CTV into pre-roll, which we're doing, and then probably into display and retail things, and we could talk about that if you want. But as we expand, I'm accepting that we're going to have to build parity to the other DSPs, but I'm not doing cookies. I just don't think I'm ever going to replace a DSP that manages cookies or those decisions, or at least in the next 10 years, I'm not going to replace them. So I'm focused only on this like audience cookieless opportunity type style.
Eric, you may remember the zip code conversation you and I had where I pitched you the exact same idea 2 years ago. Yeah, it's a good idea. So what, devil's advocate on the zip code thing, because I've heard these objections, is frequency cap, number one. Number two is unreliability of IP addresses and as they map to zip codes. Those would be kind of the two big ones. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Those are great ones. The frequency cap one leads you right into the conversation with how much do you understand this privacy thing is going to blow things up. It's like, listen, if you're buying CTV and all you get back is some type of device ID that was declared for the 10 minutes you bought this ad versus a display ad on an Apple computer, there is no way, maybe through UID, maybe through some very convoluted methods, you could tie these, but it's going to be a very small percentage of what's available. Okay, I'm not saying that you can't do frequency capping and analysis for the 10% that still holds identifiers or the 15% that's stitched together via some companies. But 70% of the inventory is not going to allow you to do that. So you have to accept what you can understand. We set up 6 deals for you with PG people. They're all capping it on their end. We've set up this for the more open CTV where we can see identifiers so that it's capped. We could do the same for other things, maybe using IP address, but IP address is not all that accurate all the time. So it's much of this. You're going to have to accept that there's no one service serves all frequency cap, no matter where you think the internal teams have built it. And we can only do the best we can in each, specific facet. And here's what we do for that.
That's exactly what I've been saying since the Chrome announcement 3 years ago. Everyone's like, what will replace the IDs? And I'm like, well, maybe nothing. Maybe it'll just be harder. I mean, you have options.
I think of it as tranches. Some area you will still be able to do what you do today. I don't know how big that is. Maybe it's 10% of $1 trillion market. 10% isn't marbles. It's still a lot of money. 10% of these stitched IDs, this conversation, again, $1 trillion market, plenty of money. But the majority is going to have no identifier, and you have to figure out a way to do it smartly.
Let's talk quickly about retail media, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Kevel, who we mentioned previously and who's on the show last week, they have recently proposed an extension to OpenRTB that would allow for product listing ads, which would be a way to bring the silos a little bit more liquidity. I don't know if you have an opinion about this, or Eric, if you have an opinion about this. Do you think that sort of thing, product listing ads, is something that DSPs are going to participate in?
100%. I mean, there's, for us that have been in this for a while, programmatic is a way for publishers to sell the remnant inventory they can't sell. Like it's really about monetizing something that in their mind is undervalued at the moment, something that's not getting bought enough. And then the other side you have, especially when you get into shopper and retail marketing with this whole revolution, is that it's not an accident that these major companies are on the major spots in these stores' shelves. And one of the ways that these companies over the table buy their space is injecting money via the advertising channels now. These are the basis of the relationship. A lot of the retail media on the big level is dealt with just like upfronts, commits. Hey, I'm going to spend $1 billion on your thing. Make sure I get that end cap with my sponge. And they're like, no doubt, you got it. So then the people buying it are just trying to make sure that the money goes through correctly. So I believe that because of the natural need for the commits to get spent and for the publishers to need to monetize more of it, because they always do, that will lead to more programmaticness of how this is done. But then again, with privacy and with this, we own the data revolution, they're all going to want to control everything on their end.
Right. Eric, you think a lot about retail media. Do you think programmatic is coming, or interoperability is coming to retail media? A little bit of silo.
Yeah. I mean, it has to, right? For this thing to truly scale and become, what we all think it can be in terms of the non-Amazon segment of the space. It has to. So yeah, Kevel's a portfolio company, and we think this idea of adding liquidity to it is just awesome. And I think Keith probably said it better than me in terms of that.
Right. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll come back with the news of the week. All right. We're back. So we're recording this on Wednesday morning, which is earlier than we usually record. So we may miss some news. I think there is going to be some news this week, is my spidey sense. So we're a little bit backed up. So the first item was announced probably right after we recorded last week, which was more on the MediaMath saga. So our friend Lara O'Reilly, who was on the show about 3 weeks ago, she put out her latest article that Joe Zawadzki and a team from Aperium Ventures, was preparing to raise $10 million to make a bid for bankrupt MediaMath. So Eric is recused. He's not allowed to speak. He is on mute. So I guess, Keith, what do you think? Would Eric make a good CEO of MediaMath?
Well, Eric's storied accomplishments in this business are, amazing. But what's funny is that I'm building a DSP.
Yeah.
You've built a DSP.
Yep.
And this guy might be trying to buy a DSP.
I think if I had $10 million, I'd just build one. I wouldn't try to buy this thing. I mean, I think there's two questions that immediately come up, which is $10 million, is that really enough for the cash flow needs and of this DSP? And the second related question is, are the suppliers going to turn them back on without getting paid the money they're owed?
Both good questions. I mean, listen, it's a funny room here of DSP conversations, but you can't just come, from a random place and show up and say, I'm going to build a DSP. The publishers are like, who are you? I'm extending you no credit.
Yep.
Who are the clients that are going to trust you? You're right. There's a lot of DSPs out there, but if you try to do all these integrations, it's not like they're like, hey, get on in here. They're first, all of them are like, who are you and why for a while. And, there's definitely something that like, if you could buy an established product that's plugged into the major exchanges that doesn't carry a debt load and can, again, if I'm right and there's 1,000 logins tomorrow, what's another login? So like, I don't know. I as somebody building a DSP, I definitely don't think it's crazy. I think that it, obviously a lot of the devil's in the details, but on its face, if you told me that that company, which has moved billions and billions of media dollars, has got value in those assets for sure, 100%.
Yeah,
I would, kind of like, I'm like, that seems low, but
seems a little low. I think part of it is that MediaMath had a lot of companies that had built on their APIs and built on their data feeds and things like that. And that's hard to switch. And a lot of those companies were left high and dry by the bankruptcy. So maybe the part of the theory here, and once again, we aren't asking Eric, part of the theory here is that, there's a bunch of customers who would just turn it back on if it existed. But, how is the conversation with Magnite going to go when they got stiffed on $8 million? Sure, it's a new balance sheet, but like, I don't know.
It's Joe on the phone,
Yeah, we gotta get Joe.
That wasn't me. Nobody come on.
Comment on this.
We're restarting this whole thing, and like the agency cycle, how people spend money. Again, if the wind's blowing our way, and they're like, hey, these 6 platforms I used today are not going to get the job done anymore, then I would think that the original team, who has unbelievably large number of relationships and, again, could rebuild the strategic profile of how to go to market and make money, you get the sequential liability going. Hey, once he pays me, I'll pay you. You get those conversations over the top. I would think you could make it work. I would think you could. All right.
Well, this will not be the last time we talk about this subject. All right. It was a little bit of a slow news week, but there were 2 articles published in trade press this week that were some of the most batshit crazy things I've seen in ad tech. So we're going to do some dramatic readings here. So the first was my friends at Cognitiv. So Cognitiv is another DSP. Cognitiv is a DSP run by Jeremy Fain, who's a friend of mine, former Beeswax client. I gave him a little bit of too much of a hard time on Twitter. If you're listening, I apologize, but we're still going to make fun of you. So Cognitiv published a study. I don't really care what the study was. The study was basically saying that bid shading is bad because people don't know how it works and maybe they're not getting the optimal prices. Fine, whatever. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't know. But the funny part is Dotas, the publication, wrote an article about it. I think it's probably a paid article. And they just pulled out the thesaurus and went bonkers. So first of all, the article, I recommend reading it. The article calls Cognitiv a juggernaut, which, I just looked on LinkedIn and they have 80 employees. So maybe that's more than I thought they had, but still a juggernaut, maybe not. Okay, I'm going to read this paragraph that I found here, and I'll try to get the feeling across on the podcast. In an industry plagued by labyrinthian supply chains and pervasive waste, this report brings to light the necessity for advertisers to assertively pressure agencies and ad tech partners to remain vigilant in cost management. Bid shading, proffered as a solution to counteract publisher-flavored tilt of first-price auctions, is unveiled as a convoluted enigma that leaves media buyers baffled and bewildered.
I actually had to turn my camera off.
My God. Wow. I mean, did AI write this? It might just be AI that wrote this.
Yes. So my theory, and Pesach hopefully will chime in on the internet, is that, they ran this through ChatGPT, said to put it in the voice of the introduction to Star Wars or some sort of epic film, and ran it through once or twice more, saying increase the drama.
More drama. ChatGPT. We need to earn our placement fee here.
Plus drama.
Does anyone actually want to talk about bitch hating, or is that just not nearly as interesting as the article?
Well, bitch hating in general is kind of especially when you build the DSP, it sees traffic coming in. It sees all the opportunities to place ads. You can learn a lot, right? You can figure out a lot of stuff. I don't think that it's, you guys understand yield and the publisher's plight to make more money. I think that it's just kind of the call and response to that stuff. I don't think it's as complicated or as dramatic as they made it.
Yeah, they made it pretty dramatic.
Dramatic.
So basically, the problem is that most algorithms in ad tech were built for second price auctions, which means what they do, the algorithm does, is predict what the impression will be worth to an advertiser. And that's great if you're running a second price auction. But as soon as you're running a first price auction, what it's actually worth to you is overpaying quite a bit, because what you really want to pay is a penny more than the minimum price you can get it at. So bid shading is sort of this giant Band-Aid put on first price auctions. It happens. And we did it at Beeswax. We charge for it. That was the other thing, is part of the argument against bid shading is that companies like the Trade Desk, they charge a percentage of what you save using their bid shading algorithm. And the argument is like, well, I thought that's what your algorithm was getting me the best price. Why are you charging me more to get a better price? And I get it. Well, we did it too at Beeswax. So shit happens.
Well, also, man. It plays, listen, there's a little bit of this story of like, why is programmatic so complicated, meets this, like, is it overbuilt at this point type of conversation, which, like, let's be real. Like, it is complicated, but there's also an enormous amount of business that's trying to work their way in and justify the need for this and this. And like, again, I would think that bid shading is very complicated. Again, the more complicated, the more you can kind of bury fees and money. It's, again, it might, I don't want to say it's reaching an end with the cookie thing, but again, they might be getting a little bit nervous that there's going to be so many changes that we got to come out with as many ways we could charge people as possible.
I think if you think about it, the reason why you're bidding differently on every impression in an auction is because you have data that's different on every impression. And if cookies were to totally go away, there would be no identity. A lot of the impressions would all look alike, and you wouldn't be able to really value them very well. All right, let's go on to the second batshit article.
Only one quick second on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sybid's acquisition. Do you think that those guys looked and said, man, we're not getting much signal back on what's working for the machine learning algorithm. There's less data because the cookies are going away. Oh, you know what's not going to work when the cookies go away? A machine learning AI algorithm. And we should maybe unload this thing now. I don't know the guys, but like...
I don't know. They got a good price. I mean...
don't get me wrong. Amazing. But I'm just saying that it's... you've been an entrepreneur. You think you could go to the moon. They might have seen things that made them nervous and said, we should unload this now.
Yeah, it's one way to look at it. I think the other thing is that there's both a lot of demand for custom algorithms. We saw that at Beeswax, but there are also independent companies like Chalice, Sybid. There's a lot of demand for that, but no one has ever scaled it to be a big business. There's never been a $100 million revenue company that does custom algorithms. So at some point you have to sell. That's kind of the bottom line. True. Okay. Second batshit crazy article of the week. This isn't so much about the writing. This is about the actual argument, the content. So sites are made for advertising sites. These are sites that are garbage, that are filled with ads and slideshows and video players. And until I read this article, I thought we all agreed this was a bad thing. But then Digiday comes out with effectively a both sides article about MFA ads by Seb Josephs and Kelly Barber. I want to give them credit for their point of view. And this article basically says, yeah, they stink, but kind of they give us reach. And, we register conversions. So really, are they that bad? So I will once again do a little bit of a dramatic reading here. Imagine a web page drowning in towering banner ads and strategically placed video players, transforming browsing into a chaotic commercial nightmare. Yes, okay, I imagine that. To a critical observer, this mishmash of intrusive ads and dubious content might seem like a digital apocalypse. Okay, I'm with you so far. However, the next word is however. However, Lurking in the background, the algorithm responsible for ad placements consider these sites to be prime opportunities. They straddle the line between authenticity and potentially invalid traffic, and that leaves just enough wiggle room for marketers to do the mental contortions necessary to swallow this bitter pill. Wow. I don't even know what to say, man.
Yeah, we've been doing this a while, right? Like bot traffic ain't new. Like the idea that computers register websites is not new, but I've never seen an article defending the other side. It's just too ridiculous. It's so good. It's so good.
It seemed to be an intellectual exercise almost, college professor saying, give me the argument for, give me the argument against, versus I think Seb or the other author or like the person from Sharethrough who was quoted endorsing this stuff. I don't think there is a person in this space besides the people that actually throw these MFA sites on exchanges somehow and get them through that would think these are in any way acceptable.
Right. It's the dirty laundry, and I guess they're just showing the dirty laundry. Is that the charitable argument about this article? That it's like, it's there, people buy it, it gives them reach, and it games the attribution systems, so it's not as bad as we think.
They're just trying to explain why these things continue to, get optimized towards. But again, there is no argument for MFA sites. Just no, full stop.
There is an explanation about why they continue to exist. And the explanation is a mixture of laziness and lack of accountability at agencies and lack of transparency in reporting. Those are all true things that cause them. But we should all agree that they're bad and need to go away. I thought so before I read the article.
If you put the whole thing together and look at it from like top to bottom, it is like rich with irony. It's like, okay, so websites see the fact that they need to make splashier, crazier headlines to drive more traffic. Okay? So
right.
They can drive more traffic. And the fraudsters start to realize that like real publications and made for advertising websites are like getting close to each other. Like we'll just source pretend content about something, drive traffic to it, right? And get advertisers to buy ads. So it's just like, how do we get the eyeballs and what do eyeballs look like saga that publishers deal with, to the point where somebody said to one of the reputable publications, I need an article that says there's another side. And it's like, all right, that could get some traffic. And it's like this whole game of like, well, this got a lot of attention and it is quite ridiculous, but it does show the other side. And it probably got a lot of action. So I think it's a little state of the media world as well, which also, by the way, plays into this made for advertising websites thing. It's all
very meta that a trolling article about this got a lot of attention. Let's do a quick wrap up on our latest news around our favorite website, x.com. So, Eric, what's your thinking on the fight? It doesn't seem like it's happening, the Zuck fight.
Yeah, thankfully it's not happening. I say thankfully because, again, I maintain that Zuck would defeat Elon in a matter of seconds, and Elon could get potentially injured. So yes. I think it's good. What seemed to happen was, and again, I've been kind of away for a couple of weeks. Elon was like changing location, saying he had an injury, and Zuck is just like Sylvester Stallone in Rocky IV in his background, just training and chopping wood and like wrestling bears, and he's had enough.
Yeah. And luckily Elon won't be injured, so we could still have a future of our colonies on Mars. And then the other is X news, which was really obnoxious, came out yesterday, which was, it appears that X is intentionally putting delays on the redirects to websites that Elon doesn't like. So if you click on an article to the New York Times off of a tweet, it's slow. It takes a while to resolve to the New York Times. Do the same thing with the Wall Street Journal right away. And it's the same thing with Threads, and it's the same thing with Reddit. And anyone who's gotten on his bad side is being punished with latency. This is just despicable. It's just despicable. I don't know what else to say. Assuming it's true. I mean, it could be the latency is for some other reason. It's just a coincidence that's all the sites he doesn't like that are slow. But it really does appear to be a pattern. And this just breaks the internet. It is vindictive. It goes against free speech. It's just terrible.
I can't understand. Again, he is in a level of raising money and having conversations with very, very deep pockets where I don't understand why, but it looks like he's trying to take it all down. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. Like, it doesn't make any sense financially, but he seems to make decisions repeatedly that are going to, like, I would think slowly, shed off the valuable pieces of the service and business over time. But I don't know. I'm not.
Certainly seems that way.
Yeah. One piece of data, I did a quick Google. So according to Neiman Lab, which I believe is reputable.
Yeah, they're very reputable.
Yeah, the traffic to news organizations. What do you think it is from Twitter as of at least early this year?
It's very low. I know. I've seen, I don't know the numbers, but the stats are that far more comes from Google News and Meta than from Twitter.
What do you think the percentage is, Keith?
That comes from Twitter now, or when was it?
Earlier this year.
I mean, I would think for a news site, somewhere between 5 and 10, I would think.
Ari?
I'd say lower. 2
yeah.
or 3.
Again, according to Neiman Lab, 1.5%.
Yeah. It's an influence.
It's not. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Yeah, exactly. It's of that 1.5%. Like, what's the value of the Twitter user? Which I would imagine is significant.
Well, this podcast is a good example. We're an independent media company, and probably half of the things we talk about we learned about on Twitter. So an article trends on Twitter. I read it. You read it. Yep. Shows up in our notes, and we talk about it, and it gets exposed to another 10,000 people or whoever listen to this podcast. So it's really important, but not directly.
Yeah, that's really well said.
All right. So this was an awesome conversation. This was one of the funniest episodes I think we've ever had. Keith, thanks for keeping it light. Good luck with the DSP. Pontiac is a cool name. And I think we'll hear a lot more about it in the future.
Thank you so much both for having me. Big fan. And just thanks so much. I loved sharing the stage with you for a minute here. Thanks.
Eric, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. This is awesome. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for listening. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.